So for today, we have this review worksheet here, but we are starting with, what if I just needed you to factor something? Could you factor? We're going to move through the different kinds of factoring. Could you factor that? This is the most basic kind of factoring, and it's got to be just like, oh, server, this is easy. I've had this for a while now. You start with the x and the x. You do the signs next. I know a lot of people think it's numbers. It's not. It's the signs. Addie, do we use a plus and a plus? Minus and minus? Plus and a minus? Plus and minus, because that one's negative. All right. Then the numbers. Well, it's got to be a 7 and a 1. It's the only factors of 7. I made it prime on purpose. Makes it easier. All right, so let's say it's a 7 and a 1. Then you use the 7 here and the 1 here. Well, maybe. You don't know until you check. If you don't know how to check this, you've got to ask me. This is negative 1x. This is 7x. Together they make positive 6x. Is positive 6x what we wanted, Garrett? No. We wanted negative 6x. At that moment, you have the opposite of what you wanted. You change the signs, not the numbers. The reason this matters is because in a second, it's going to be more complicated factoring, and you have to do it this way. If you want the sign to change, change the signs, not the position of the numbers. That makes this be negative, this be positive. Grand total will come out to negative 6x. That's what we wanted. All right, now we got to get into the next thing, which is beyond factoring. Some of you can't even start the problem. If you can't start, then how can you finish? Now that you got it factored, you have two things, x equals 7 and x equals negative 1. Now everybody, change this to less than or equal to. Because on that kind, you now have to do what's called testing intervals. Next question I got from kids was, where do I put the numbers on the number line? All that matters is we count from left to right, like 1, 2, 3, 4. So the numbers that are bigger should be on the right. So of these two numbers, 7 is clearly bigger, so it needs to be on the right. And then negative 1 is on the left. Next of the million little things that you got to know for this, should it be empty circles or filled in circles? Say it if you know. Filled in is correct because it says or equal to. When this symbol has an or equals, you fill them in. That means those numbers work. Like if you stuck 7 into the equation, what would happen is you'd end up getting 0. But 0 is less than or equal to 0, so it would work. All right, now you've got to test an interval. That means you got to pick a number that's in here and see if it works. What is a number that's between negative 7 and 1? Don't overthink this. 0. 0 is always an awesome number to check. Because when you stick it in, parts of your equation just disappear. I'm going to rewrite the original equation. Would you please stick 0 in it? When you put 0 in it, you could put it in here also, but you get the same answer. I personally think it's maybe easiest to just put it in the original, especially 0. Because 0 makes the first two parts disappear, and it says negative 7 is less than or equal to 0. Now, some people just are like, so what? Is that true? Because it won't always come out true. Is negative 7 really less than or equal to 0? All right, so I can tell that some people know the answer to this and some people don't. Because I can tell that some people are like raising, like some people are saying yes, some people are saying no. I'm going to put this on a number line. You guys are all from Minnesota. You know what negative temperatures are like. Here's where positive 7 degrees is. It's above 0. Here's where negative 7 is. It's below 0. Now I ask you again. Is negative 7 less than 0? Yes. It is. It's below. You could think of the word less than meaning like below. Is negative 7 below 0? Yes, it is. So that was tested and it found that it worked. Because it was a true statement, negative 7 is less than 0, I shade that. All right. Now, this is the part where you've got to get this down. And if you are sitting there going, no, I don't get this, if you still don't get it after another practice problem, you need to come ask for help today. I can fix it. I really can. If you're sitting there going, I can tell there's a few of you that are like, I'm lost. This is really, really critical. All right, let's do another one that's like that. I'm going to have this one already pre-factored. Yay, half the work is factoring. I've already factored it. So what do you have to do? This should make you think of the tip of a number line, because these answers are always ranges of numbers. So you've got 3 things to put on this number line. Why 3 things? I see these 2. Oh, because of that one also. What makes these equal 0? X equals 0, x equals 4, and x equals negative 5. Hopefully you can put those in order on your number line, figure out if they're empty circles or filled in circles, and then test the intervals. All right, give that a shot. And like, let's say you pick a number in between these 2, and you pick the, like, you put in 2 or something. You're going to stick that in here and here and here and see if it comes out bigger than 0. If you get confused by greater than, go to a thermometer. Thermometers for Minnesotans usually help, because you can tell if something's below 0 or above 0 on a thermometer. All right. I need to give you some time to see if you know what to do here. This is the hardest part. It's called testing intervals. If by now you didn't put these here, here, and here, I wanted to help you with that, because you have to have them in order from smallest to biggest. Now you're figuring out where to shade. Maybe it's only between 0 and 4. Maybe it's 2 different places. That's likely, by the way, that there's 2 different spots where you're going to shade. Okay, so we got to test numbers. What is a number that is between these 2? Well, like 1. That's a nice, easy number. So we test 1. How do you test 1? You go stick it in here, and here, and here. Now I'm going to see what I get. I get 1 times negative 3. 1 times negative 3 times, when I put a 1 in here, I get 6. And that's got to be bigger than 0. That was critical right there. Do you get that's negative 18 is bigger than 0? And you're not used to math lying to you. Negative 18 is not greater than 0. That's a false statement. So I just checked this and it came out false, which means that did not work. Did anybody else test between 0 and 4? Did you also get it to not work, or did you think it worked? It did not work? Good. You were right. All right. Now let's test 5. So I'm going to go put 5 in. I'm going to erase the stuff. I'm going to stick 5 into my function. This is the hardest thing, but you've got to get this down by Friday, which is when we test on this stuff. So if you're not getting it, that's fine, but you've got to try it with me. Now we're going to put in something between between 4 and bigger than 4. So I'm testing 5 right now. So I'm putting a 5 in right here, and a 5 goes in here, and a 5 goes in here, And it should come out bigger than 0, but it might be a lie. We'll find out. 5 minus 4 is 1, so 5 times 1 times 10, and that's 50. Is 50 bigger than 0? Yes, it worked. So, did any of you shade in the right side? Yes? Good. You guys are the ones that are catching on to this. So it was bigger than 4 is an area that worked. I tested 5. When I stuck it in, it worked. Now I need to test something between 0 and negative 5, like negative 1. Always pick smaller, easier numbers if you can. So now I'm going to go through and stick in negative 1. Negative 1 goes in, and I have negative 1 here. And then negative 1 minus 4. And then negative 1 plus 5 greater than 0. And this is negative 1 still. This is negative 5. And this is 4. That comes out to two negatives. Positive 20. Is positive 20 bigger than 0? Yes. So that area worked. So I'm going to shade in that area. Now I want to warn you, usually if there's 4 sections like this, only 2 of them will work. So I'm expecting that the last section won't work. But I don't know until I try it. So I'm going to check with negative 6. Now I'm testing negative 6 in here. Negative 6. Negative 6 minus 4. Negative 6 plus 5 should all be bigger than 0. Negative 6, negative 10, and negative 1. Negative times negative times negative makes negative 60. Is that bigger than 0? No. Negative 60, 3 negatives. Negative 60 is not bigger than 0, so that does not work. We figured it out. It's those 2 areas. That is an okay answer in my book, unless the test said, are you on your phone, sir? Okay, put your phone back in. Actually, since you were on it, go trap it in your phone jail. You can have it back at the end of the hour. I want this to be written like this. If the test says you have to have it in interval form, this is how you'd have to write it. Let's process that. That's called an interval. And that's saying between negative 5 and 0 it worked. But empty spots make parentheses. If this had been filled in circles, it would have been brackets. And then from 4 to infinity, you need a parenthesis for an empty spot like that. Parentheses always around the infinities. And there you go. That's called interval notation. All right. So, you guys all need to step up if you want. You guys decided, I want to take this harder math class. Like, either you've already taken FST, some kids in here have, or you were like, that class would be too easy for me, I want to take the hard class. Well, this is the moment where you step up into that. All right, let's do another one where it's already factored, because I think most of you can factor, but I think it's the testing intervals part that you're not awesome at. There, you got it all factored. It came out to this. Can you make the number line? Slap the 3 numbers on the number line, and then test numbers by sticking them in. Like maybe you want to try putting in. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change one thing. I'm sorry. Make this negative 10 right here, or a minus 10 right here. I just changed that number. Why? Because otherwise you'd have to put a 1/2 in the function, which is a pain in the butt. So it's not like it's illegal, but I made the intervals so small you'd have had to test a fraction, which is kind of a pain. Okay. So you got a number line. You got three things on the number line in order from small to big. You pick a number. You stick it in here, here, and here, and you see if it really comes out less than 0. I'm going to pause for a second while you try the hardest thing that's on this test, called testing intervals. A little progress to make sure you're doing it right. You should have got 3 answers. X equals 0, X equals 4, and X equals 10. Here's 0, here's 4, here's 10. Empty circles because there's no or equal sign. Now you should be testing numbers in between these and seeing if they really, when put in, come out to less than 0. Okay, let's see how you did. Tell me an interval that you checked. All right, you guys are my class that doesn't seem to ever want to raise your hands, so I'm going to just call on somebody here. If somebody is willing to raise your hand, you're going to save some other kid pain so that they don't have to be called on. Any volunteers? Oh, thank you. 1. You checked 1. Awesome. So I'm going to put a 1, which would be right in here between 0 and 4. Tested 1. And what did you think? Did you think it worked? No. You think it does not work? All right, so let's test 1. I'm putting 1 in there, and there, and there, and I get 1 times -3 times -9 less than 0, and that is positive 27, which is definitely not less than 0. Very good. That interval does not work. If you checked any number between 0 and 4, it should have not worked. All right. Some other kid willing to save somebody some pain because you checked an interval? Alex, what do you say? -1. You checked -1. And what do you say? Do you feel like it worked? It worked. All right. I'm going to check it with you. We're going to check -1, which is clearly here. And we're checking that interval of less than 0. So I'm going to stick a -1 right here, a -1 right here, and a -1 in there. And this comes out to -1 times -5 times -11. And that's 3 negatives makes it -55. That's definitely less than 0. Very good. It worked. Usually then, it would go like this. This one should work because it's on the other side of an area that didn't work. Does anybody have evidence that between 4 and 10 worked? You tried something and it worked? You tried 5 and you think it worked? All right, let's double check it. I'm checking 5. So I'm sticking a 5 into my equation, and the sad part is that I just erased my equation, but I think I can recreate it easily here. Is this supposed to be less than 0 or bigger than 0 at the end?
Less than 0.
Thank you. Okay. And you said to check 5? Okay. So we're checking 5, and then 5, and then 5. And that's 5 times 1 times -5. 1 negative makes the whole thing negative. -25 is less than 0. It worked. You're right. Yay. That's the other place it worked. And I expected that, because if you find an area that doesn't work, usually it's the things on both sides of that get shaded. Okay. And then I would suspect that 11, if tested, would not work. Did anybody try 11? All right. Let's everybody just stick 11 in real quick. Everybody try it yourself. I know it's easier to watch me, but try sticking in 11. I'm going to pause while you put in 11, and hopefully I'm expecting it to not work. 11 times 7 times 1 is 77. Is 77 less than 0? 77 is less than 0. Is that true? No, that's not true. So it did not work here, and I expected it to not work. Awesome. Now, let's see if you could handle this part. It is possible that on the test they will say, answer must be an interval notation. Can you put the parentheses and the brackets and the commas in the right spots to give this answer in interval notation? All right, random kit. In the back, negative infinity to 0, yup. And then 4 to 10, yup. Do you know what to put between them? It's actually a U. But if you had that looking kind of like a V, I wouldn't have cared. It should be a U. That means union of. And I know it's a weird symbol, but, and no, I wouldn't mark the whole problem wrong, but you might lose partial credit if you didn't have that U. It stands for union. That means that this and this together are the answer. I know you learned those union intersect symbols last year. I'm not going to rehash all of what they mean, but union means this and that. Like, you're either in here or you're in here. You could even use the word or. Okay. One last one, but this one, you need to actually factor. And then you check the intervals. Like I said before, tons of little things you have to know how to do. One of them is factor. Another one is check intervals. See if you can pass the factoring test here. If you didn't know by now, you probably need some help. There's an X in everything. So you divide everything by X, and you get X squared plus X minus 2. That was the critical first step. This is called the GCF, the greatest common factor. What did these all have in common? They all had an X in them, so this is called the GCF. Now we got to get it to look like this again, like it did last time. X and X, got to be a plus and a minus because this number's negative. And then how do you make a 2? Well, it's got to be a 2 and a 1. And I think I did it right, but I'll check. Negative 1x, 2x. Put them together, grand total of x, which is what I have. Sweet. But now is when you start testing intervals. See, you got to do all that work first, and then this is why Precalc is a step up class. You had to do like 4 hard steps to even start the number line. Then you got to put the numbers in order from smallest to biggest. Now remember me saying that if you tested an interval and it failed, then usually both intervals on either side of it are going to work? Do you get how it's going to be a pain in the butt to test this one because the only thing in between 0 and 1 are fractions, like a half? So I'm going to choose to not test a half just because it's a pain in the butt. It's not that hard, but it's a pain in the butt. So I'm going to test this interval, and if it works, that probably means that the intervals on both sides of it don't work. So I'm going to test in there, which is negative 1. If you haven't already, everybody try to test negative 1 by sticking it in the equation. See if it comes out less than 0. -1 here, -1 here, -1 here, -1, 1, -2. Two negatives make a positive. 2 is 2 less than 0? No, this didn't work because 2 isn't less than 0. That makes me think that this 1/2 is going to work. Because, you know, if something doesn't work, usually the things on both sides of it do work. So now I'm going to check -3 and see if it works. That's my next one to test. -3, -3, -3, -3, and -1, and -4. 3 negatives makes it negative. -12 less than 0? Yes, it is. That worked. Now my assumption is that that 1/2 also is going to work. How do you test it? You stick it in. And halves aren't that bad. I mean, it's 0.5. If you want to use 0.5, you can. 1/2 plus 2 is 2.5. 1/2 minus 1 is -1/2. So this is 0.5, 2.5, and -0.5. Do you get there's a negative in it? Then I don't even care what that number is. I don't care what that number is. I know it's negative. Do we get negatives are less than 0? No matter what negative number it is, it's a negative number. So it's got to be less than 0. So it worked. Boom. This is the 2 spots you shade. And then, just in case they force you to write it in interval notation, everybody write this with the parentheses and the little union thingy, Bob. Try to write your final answer in interval notation. Negative infinity to -2. And notice it's a parenthesis because there is not a filled in circle because this was less than 0. If it was less than or equal to 0, then there should be filled in and it should be brackets. But I just said a less than, so then it's got to be parentheses. 0 to 1, parentheses. There you go. That's called interval notation. I think this is a perfectly good answer, and unless the test says otherwise, I'll take that answer. If it forces you to use interval, you got to write like that. And you've just accomplished what I think are the hardest questions. So I know, some of you got your butt kicked on some of those. Here's some of the easier ones. Maybe some of you are like, I'm okay with a C on this test. At least give me an easy problem. All right, here's an easy problem. X squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 0. Solve. Notice, no number line, because no greater or less sign. But it's still factoring. That's why I've said you've got to master your first 20. Basics like this. You can't even do this, then you can't even get a C on the test. This is factor. Now I made this one a little trickier because it's got a negative in it, so you know there must be a negative, but I made the last number positive. To Trent, how do you always start these?
Put the two x's.
Yep, x and x. Then you do the signs. What signs do you think I should use?
Two negatives.
Two negatives, because then it'll make positive 9. Very good. And then it's got to be something that makes a 9. Well, it could be a 9 and a 1, but if you check it, you do the outside and the inside thing, it won't come out to 6. Or a negative 6. It won't come out to either one. So then it can't be 9 and 1. And you change it to a 3 and a 3. And then the outside's negative 3x and the inside's negative 3x. And total that's negative 6x. And that's what we want. Sweet! This one does not need a number line, but it does need you to finish it. What is the final answer? X equals what? 3. Do you get if you just factored it? I can't give you the credit. You never said the answer. The answer was 3. Yeah, you could say it twice. X equals 3, x equals 3. I wouldn't mark that wrong. All right, cool. And one last kind that we haven't talked about much. If you're going to solve this, you got to get that square root off of there. You know what to do? How do you get square roots off? Yes?
Square both sides.
Correct. So we square both sides, everybody. And the left side, don't overthink it. The square root just cancels the squared and they're gone. And the other's x squared. But I get some people right here will be stumped. Garrett, are you stumped?
Well, but I think I know what to do.
Okay, what do you think we should do next?
I think you should subtract the x squared and move it over so you have 0.
You could subtract the x squared, but let me show you why you wouldn't like it. Because then you'll have negative x squared plus 4x plus 2 equals 0. And the problem is you'd have to factor a negative out of everything. It's a pain in the butt.
All right.
So instead,
Other way around.
What should you do instead then?
Minus 4x.
Minus 4x. Because we want to get it so that the lead term, the x squared, is positive. At least you knew to set it equal to 0. It's just that your factoring would have been hard the other way. Now the factoring is doable, but the problem is, I don't think this one factors. Could we do this to you on the test? Absolutely. We could. You could factor all day and you'll never figure out a combo that works. It's got to be a plus and a minus. And it's got to be a 2 and a 1. And there's no way to rearrange it so that the outside and the inside come out to that. So what the heck? If you can factor it, you should. You should know the follow-up to my favorite saying. If you can factor it, you should. But if you can't factor it, you got to use the quadratic formula. X equals negative b. See if you can finish this off in your head. Plus or minus the... Anybody, huh? Square root of b squared. You may remember? Minus 4ac all over 2a. You have to know that? Yes. You signed up for Precalc. You got to know algebra. That was in algebra. You learned it a long time ago. You got to have it at your disposal so that it's really not that hard from here. There's a 1 right there. I think most of you, when asked, would have known there was a 1 there. There's a negative 4 here, and there's a negative 2 there. That's A, B, and C. So B goes here. B goes here. A goes here. C goes here. And that's negative, negative 4 is 4 plus and minus the square root of 16 plus 4 times 2 is 8 all over 2. 4 plus and minus the square root of 24 over 2. You see why they say Precalc is so much harder? It's the most dropped class in a lot of schools. because it's such a big step up over last year. We're in the middle of a math problem, and all of a sudden you had to recall a 16-part formula and then stick numbers in it. And then you even have to know this. Square root of 24 simplifies into root 4 and root 6. And that's really 2 root 6. So now it's 4 plus and minus 2 root 6 all over 2. Have you ever seen that before? Yes, on the first 20. Gotta learn your first 20. So when you come to this, you're like, gosh, no big deal. Take the 2 out. And then what do you have left here when you divide everything by 2? You got 2 plus and minus root 6. And then your 2's can cancel. And there's your answer. All of that is stuff you can know. It's not that hard of stuff. But there was like 9, 10 steps. So don't underestimate this class. You've got to do your homework. And really pay attention. I think most of you pay attention really well in class. A few of you are still missing link is you're not doing the homework and checking it. I do put up the answer key every time. I mean, if I don't, it's a mistake, and you should be like, hey, Mr. Server, can you put up the key? And then I will. All right? So if you really try, you can do this. But man, there was a crap ton of steps on that one. Would there be anything that hard in the test? Yes, there will. So what do we do again? We squared both sides. Do you guys get that? Then we got a quadratic, and we had to set it equal to 0. That was to here. Once it's set equal to 0, you can factor it. But this one didn't factor. So you had to know the quadratic formula. Then you stick the numbers in from A, B, and C. Get stuck in there, and you simplify it down, and there's your answer. That's high quality pre-calc. Doable, but not easy. Then let's end with one nice easy one. Everybody, stay with me on this one last question, and then we're just gonna have a bunch of work time. First step. Anna, it's you. What do you think the first step is? Add 3 is correct. Next step. Row 3, person 5. Claire, that's you. Divide by 2. Next step. Back corner. Yes. 3x minus 3 equals one thing, and 3x minus 3 equals a different thing.
Positive 5 and negative 5.
Correct. Adding 3 to both sides of everything. 3x equals 8, and 3x equals negative 2. X equals 8/3, and x equals negative 2/3. And that's the easy one. Whoa. All right, so there's an answer key and a worksheet. Everybody bust out the worksheet. And we are out of here very soon, but let me tell you which one to skip. Do you have it up on your sheet machine?
Yeah.
I'm going to have you skip 6 and 7. Just like last night's homework, skip 6. Problems 6 and 7. All right, have a great day.
There's also a second page as well.
Just skip 6 and 7, though. Have a great day.